Okay, so starting from the top, I'm Grant Wilson, Executive Chair of Tivan Limited in Sydney this afternoon, and welcoming everyone to another instalment of our investor briefings. I think this would be third for the year, probably the final one. This will be a big push for the company now into the AGM and heads down, really. We're frantically busy on a bunch of fronts, but really pleased to be sharing the progress with everyone today. It's an important time for the company. It's been a very important couple of months, so I did want to jump online at the earliest available opportunity and provide this update. I know the replays are being really well watched now as well. I know we've got lots of new shareholders. And for those new ones, we have really tried from the start of Tivan to emphasize this open and transparent communication policy, which does involve regular updates because the company's moving fast. It does involve answering all questions, however they're phrased. You'll see a bunch tonight in the deck online. And so without further ado, we'll just jump straight into it. I'll try my best to keep this inside an hour as usual. I think I've got my work cut out for me to do that today because there is so much to say, but no time like the present. So we'll just jump straight in. All right, our slides, which went out on the ASX. We had to send out a quick replacement. One of our slides was a bit stale. So this is the fresh deck, and it is on the ASX platform for all to see. The starting point tonight, and particularly bearing in mind that we do have a large new cohort of shareholders and many more people following the company, given recent media, is to emphasise the shift in the mission of the company, which I explained at last year's AGM. That was November. For the first year or so of Tivan, we were focused on grid storage, vanadium batteries. That was what I inherited when I walked in the door, along with many other things besides. And the focus that time in the mission, and I've always believed it's important for a company to have a mission, was to facilitate large-scale grid storage. In November last year, Tivan, I can confirm now, was already deep in discussions with Japanese government, lead agencies, and I could see this pathway opening up to build a strategically important project, and beyond that, a strategically important company. That's the path that we've been on since, hence the mission enunciated last year. There's been so much action since then, including Timor, progress at Sandover, which I'll talk to today. But for the new and for the old, we're firmly on this path. There was a lot of deliberation at the board level at that time about the mission, about the comparative advantages the company had. And 6-7 months on, I think we're probably ahead of where we thought we'd be at the AGM, and looking forward to another AGM, which I'll talk to later on. In terms of how we're getting there, the Lassonde curve remains my preferred framework. And for those that have been following the company, you'll know that. The lead and flagship project is Speewah Fluorite. That was the pivot we made 18 months ago. We've made really sustained and great progress at the project. Meantime, I'm working on additional projects that have obviously long lead times, allocating small amounts of risk capital, small amounts of team capability to mature those projects so that when we do get to free cash flow and profits, we'll have our own money to invest in projects that are already well matured. Now, along this Lassonde curve, you're going to see peaks and troughs. That's the nature of it. But fair to say tonight, the Speewah Fluorite Project is progressing rapidly, especially on the project facilitation and project finance side, along with the fundamental work we're doing on the project studies, and of course, importantly, in the field. I do want to emphasize the field, and I'll be emphasizing this later on because I feel sometimes that our online shareholders probably a little bit neglecting the work that's going on at Speewah. It's a momentous program that is a big preoccupation of the company and has been for several months now. But in terms of how we're setting up, and this all goes to the generation of shareholder value, short-term and long-term, you want that pathway to free cash flow as soon as possible. That is and remains the priority, and that is Speewah Fluorite. Speewah Vanadium, we'll talk to that in a bit as well, remains in what I would refer to as the orphan phase, or Lassonde curve framework. That's a phrase that's used there. Whereas back in the very early stage parts of project development, we've got 2-3 prospects there, and we're progressing those as quickly as we can, and with, I think, tremendous discipline in terms of capital utilization. We've hardly spent any money on these early stage projects, and yet they develop developing quickly, and they're providing, I think, a lot of positivity and excitement to the shareholder base. So that's the framework in terms of how the company is going to achieve its mission. In terms of the updates, project by project, Speewah Fluorite, obviously the big news since the last investor update in May was that we finalised the joint venture with Sumitomo Corporation. I think that was May the 7th. The long form documents were a big sustained push through the first quarter of this year. Again, one of those things I think that sometimes people underestimate how much work's involved in terms of lawyers, tax, negotiation, obviously, as well. We are dealing with that top level of Japan, and these things do take time, even for Tivan. I think what people didn't understand, and what I couldn't say at the time, was that we were in negotiations and diligence this whole period with JOGMEC, JOGMEC being the lead agency of Japanese government to secure metals and energy. It's a very prestigious institution. It is a formidable institution in terms of what is required to secure JOGMEC as a partner, which we now have. Enormous amount of work went on behind the scenes from September, October, right through to June, July, which people did not know about and which our team excelled at. I have many times emphasized the young and excellent team that we have put together, now up to, I think, 27 people, and particularly the people in the leadership teams. The leadership team, having been articulated back in May, were instrumental in this incredible achievement for our young company in introducing JOGMEC as a joint venture partner, sitting alongside Sumitomo in just 1 second, maybe a tech fail. No, all seems to be fine. Sitting alongside Sumitomo in the joint venture. And so this achievement, I think, is quite singular. There is really only one parallel, which was Lynas in 2011-12, where JOGMEC entered into a funding agreement for equity, large-scale equity with Lynas. In some ways, I think our achievement is even more differentiated because our project is still at PFS, and obviously this company has only been around for a very, very short period of time. Mount Weld at that time, I think, was 3 years into mining activities. So it demonstrates, I think, the criticality of fluorite. We've mentioned this several times in the past 18 months, just how important fluorite is to critical industries. It is ubiquitous across many, many critical industries: EV batteries, semiconductor manufacturing, the nuclear industry, aluminium, fluxing, refrigerant. It is everywhere. And there is a genuine structural shortage of fluorite and upstream fluorite resources, which are amenable to those use cases. Japan was aware of that from the start. And once Tivan proved the capabilities that we have in terms of the team and the geological capabilities at Speewah and then Sandover, the value proposition that we were able to present to Japan, being both Sumitomo and JOGMEC, was absolutely compelling. And so that's the journey we've been on. We're pleased to announce this in the last couple of weeks. I do think it puts Tivan in very rarefied territory. I know there was a lot of media and quite positive reaction online, and obviously we're grateful for that, but I still feel it's actually quite understated in terms of what this means for our company. Now, at the same time, we've been working on rounding out the project finance, the whole package. At the moment, the project is ballparked at $250 million of project capital. That's the PFS guidance. We are still right thereabouts, as best as we can tell. To get there, we're looking at $100 million of project equity, thereabouts, and $150 million of project debt. That's a classic makeup, 60-40, given the nature of the project being quite strong in terms of profitability. We announced in May matching project equity from an Australian investor. We hope that agreement will mature by Q4 and we'll be in a position to bring forward the Australian family office investor. It's very well regarded, great capabilities, and a very important relationship, I think, of mine. And that package enabled Export Finance Australia and NAIF to come forward with really significant progress earlier this week. We've moved into the formal due diligence stage with NAIF, and we have a letter of support from EFA. Now, obviously, these things don't happen by magic. These are parallel pathways that I've been working on for over a year. It does require extensive due diligence to have that early show of support from these two very important lenders. I think particularly with NAIF now, it's highly uncharacteristic for them to come forward at PFS stage, and it speaks to the strength of the project, our team, and of course our JV partners. It is so unusual to have been able to secure this early support from Japan right at the top levels and in terms of project equity. And obviously that's a very strong motivation for the Australian government to get involved early on and to show their support for Tivan and for the Speewah Fluorite Project. So really significant developments. I don't think there's another project in the country now that looks like this, being at PFS and effectively having ring-fenced and identified the sources of all of the project finance. Now, that doesn't mean we're at FID. We've got a big year ahead, which I'll talk to in terms of on-country activities, mining, engineering, project studies. But it does show quite conclusively the commercial demand for fluorite, the credibility that our young team has in terms of delivering the project, and just how advanced the project is overall from a technical point of view. So really, I think quite significant progress achieved in the past 2 months, but realistically, this was a year of work culminating in a series of really significant public announcements in the past couple of weeks. Okay, so to the field. This picture was taken, I think, 2 weeks ago, and it shows, the scale of the works that are being undertaken. There are 25 to 30 people in the field now. This is pretty much approaching peak in terms of the drilling campaign, which we articulated as far back as January. It's a very important campaign. The learnings from the drilling will inform the project studies and the project pathway. It is also a really huge undertaking. I've said this a few times on Twitter, but I don't think people necessarily can quite visualize or understand what it means to drill 35 kilometers. And there's all sorts of drilling taking place: metallurgical, infill, resource extension, geotech, water bores. Through this, you accumulate a tremendous amount of knowledge, and that helps you build a better project. And it's very important that we build a good project. We don't want to fall into the trap that many others have, which is take shortcuts, maybe scramble your way to FID, lowball funding, find the project collapses year 1, year 2. That is your worst case outcome. Now, obviously, because we're working with such prestigious partners, there's also demands, and they're quite correct in holding us to the highest standards of project studies and project definition all the way through. This will be apparent in feasibility study and, again, definitive feasibility study. And to meet these high standards, which de-risks the project and de-risks our company's future, we have to do a tremendous amount of work around the resource. I think there was about 25 kilometers of drilling when we picked up fluorite in the data room, and this year alone we're targeting 35 kilometers across a whole vast array. So this is what it looks like at site at the moment. It didn't look like this a month ago. I hope that visual gives you some sense of the scale of what we're working on, and it is a huge preoccupation of the company and the build out of the capabilities that we have as well. You have seen that we ramped our geological team, especially HSEC managers, and all of the capability that you require to undertake something of this magnitude. In some ways, the project started already. That's how significant this drill program is. So looking to convey that, and also mentioning that to even orchestrate a program of this magnitude, not only is there a lot of work that had to get done in terms of identifying, the different drill holes and different forms of knowledge that we're looking to accumulate. But of course, we had to work through a whole round of approvals, especially with WA government, that's Timor's program of works, and most intensively on cultural heritage, and that's with Kimberley Land Council and their various subsidiaries. And so all of that work was done, progressively through the first quarter and the second quarter, enabling us to go on country with confidence and do the right thing across the board. We want to make sure that the project is not just well specified and well designed, but all of the impacts, environmental impacts and waste streams are well managed as well. So tremendous body of work that's developing out on country will culminate in feasibility study as the next big visible point of project progress, and that's on track for November. Here is the schedule. It hasn't changed, and so I'll quickly sort of move through this slide, but for the uninitiated, we are targeting DFS middle of next year. We are highlighting that even from DFS, there'll be probably a month beyond that to get to final investment decision, maybe 1 or 2 months, because that's when the big technical review of the projects will happen with ourselves and with Japan. Japan is an owner of the project. And even beyond that, we have to work through what's known as contractual close. So if we declare final investment decision, obviously that's the aim in Q3 next year, that will be like a gold-plated final investment decision, because again, it will be being taken by the joint venture board, which is represented now by Tivan, as well as Sumitomo Corporation on behalf of Japan Fluorite Corporation. And beyond that, you're into 2 months of long-form documentation, which gets you to contractual close. And that's the first time when you can start to draw down the larger funds. Now, of course, we can arrange different forms of bridging finance and so on and so forth, and working on that already. But that's the pathway ahead. I'm highlighting this as well because we continue to get some questions, and you'll see that in a minute, around things which have already been specified and articulated. For example, there are questions today about Indigenous land use agreements, and you can see quite clearly this chart's already been published when we're targeting the Iliwa negotiations to be finalised for the access road and for the Speewah site as well. The only new addition on this slide, and let me spend 1 minute on this, is the 4th dot point. Ore sorting is emerging as a project opportunity. So I don't want to say too much about this tonight, but I do want to flag, because I think that by FS time, and also with our work at Sandover, we will need to bring our shareholders up the curve, the knowledge curve on ore sorting. So for those that are close to the project, that you'll know that the flow sheet is currently quite simple. It involves crushing, grinding, then rougher flotation, and then cleaner flotation, targeting our 97% spec. Last year, when we did the PFS, we did not have enough material from our previous owners, KRR, to test what's known as ore sorting as a step. We lacked the mass balance, to be technical, to test this. The big push that Tivan made late last year to get some drilling done, that was October, November of last year, generated sufficient mass balance for us and our metallurgists to run tests, comprehensive tests on ore sorting at Speewah. Those results have come back very positively in the first half of the year. And now we're working through trying to understand whether this technology could be applicable across the whole deposit. So once we have more material from the current drilling campaign, we're able to evaluate ore sorting in terms of its applicability across the entire project. We don't know the answer to this. What we can say is that if ore sorting is amenable across the entire project, it could result in a step change improvement in how the project fundamentals are shaping. Because what it does ultimately is it steps in after the crushing and the grinding, and it separates right at that point a lot of the waste material from a lot of the ore. And it means that we can then take potentially a high grade ore into a smaller flotation circuit, using less power, losing less people, potentially achieving even better specs. And so this is the possibility that lies ahead. We are working on this. I'm flagging it tonight just to introduce the concept, because the concept, I think, will also become quite important at Sandover. So hopefully in the next couple of months, we'll be able to talk more comprehensively about this. I also don't want to raise expectations too high. We already have a great project design, and we are on track in terms of the journey from pre-feas to feas to DFS as we are. But there is positivity, let me say, in our metallurgy team, our technical team, that ore sorting will be able to be proved up, not just at Sandover, but also at Speewah. So enough said on this topic, we will come back to it. But for those that are really closely engaged with the company, you get to start thinking about this too. Okay, to Sandover, it's our second fluorite project. It's in Central Australia. We acquired it late last year. I've said publicly, I think on the last investor briefing, that my expectation was that Sandover Fluorite Project would start to emerge in the second half of this year as a very important value driver at Tivan. That's still my central expectation. We've now done 2 rounds of surface sampling at Sandover, and we have a much better sense of the scale of the resource, having spent time in the field. The guys did another field visit this week, just remarking some of the historic boundaries on some of the mining leases. Meantime, I've been working very closely with Central Land Council in Alice Springs over the past 3 to 6 months, and pleased to say that we've been able to secure really, really expedited approvals with Central Land Council to go ahead with our drill program for October, September this year. This is a big shift, I would say, from the start of Tivan. For those that were there, they'll know that this company was TNG, and it was working on Mount Peak, and it had scorched the earth in Central Australia, literally. And it took me a year to regain standing in Central Australia, notwithstanding the fact that I grew up in Alice Springs. That's how challenging it was, what had happened, and with the relevant traditional owner groups as well. The work that we've done with the Sandover AI project over the past 18 months has given us that opportunity to heal the relationships in Central Australia. And the result is this: we will be able to proceed with great confidence at the Sandover Fluorite Project on schedule. It's a non-trivial achievement. It can take multiple years for any company in Central Australia to get these approvals, and we've achieved that already in the space of 3 months, frankly. So I don't think that's ever happened before. And so we're very grateful for the active support of the Central Land Council. They understand that we have backing for this project as part of our big announcement regarding the closure or the formal completion of the joint venture and the introduction of JOGMEC into the joint venture. There was a very important second announcement, which is that we'd secured a MOU with Sumitomo Corporation to join us on a development pathway for this project. Now, MOUs, I know sometimes they're greeted with disdain, and rightly so, probably most of the time in junior ASX land. I can tell you hand on heart that MOUs in Tokyo are not thrown around like confetti. They're just not. In fact, our MOU, even at Christmas, back at Speewah, raised some questions. People were like, this is non-binding MOU. This is Japan. This is the top of the world. The most important thing to our partners is their reputation. And so Sumitomo joining us in MOU format with a comprehensive development pathway over the next 18 months for Sandover was a fundamentally important step for our company. It shows that linkage between the two projects. It provides a pathway for our joint venture to ultimately work across 2 projects. And it shows the level of commitment, I think, that Sumitomo Corporation has to Tivan. There are so many companies out there that get stranded on either one project or one mineral. They're all in on something, and then it fails, never comes out of the orphan period in the Lassonde curve, and they get marooned, and then really bad stuff starts to happen. We're in a completely different scenario here, where we have our flagship project spoken for, effectively financed, given at this stage of development, and our prestigious joint venture partner already looking further afield at joining us in a second project. So that's a really exciting development for me, especially. Like, the reason I did this, took this big step and this big risk professionally to take on this leadership challenge at TNG, now Tivan, was because I really wanted to build something in Central Australia in my hometown of Alice. It's been an incredibly unusual route and unpredictable route to get to the point we now are at, owning a world-class resource, we think, in Central Australia, with evidently and obviously a world-class project partner. But here we are, and that is the nature of junior mining. And I think it also reflects really strongly on Tivan. Most of what we were doing for the first 18 months was complex problem solving. Now we have a pathway and pathways, and we're pushing on. And I would say that, at least at a personal level, I'm tremendously excited about the possibilities we have at Sandover. Some of the extra work that we've done here in the past couple of months is on logistics. So we wanted to, as much as we could, understand early how challenging the main negative of this project is, which is obviously the fact that it's in an extremely remote location. So we've pulled together a couple of different studies, and one of these is outsourced, like a scope, where we assessed the different transport options from site, rail, road, obviously bagging costs and so on and so forth, different product types moving from Central Australia to port. And I won't share numbers tonight, but you can know that the work's been done, and we're very satisfied. We're actually quite surprised positively in terms of the extra costs that we'll be carrying, not being beyond us and beyond these potentially world-class resources. So we wanted to attack the hardest thing first. We've done that. We know the hurdle. We've got it clear. And perhaps the biggest surprise at this stage is that we're going south. So for those that know rail corridors in Australia, perhaps that won't be a huge surprise, but you would think from where Sandover is, you go to Alice or near Alice, and you go north to Darwin to be close to Asia. For most of the produce that moves up and down the GAN, it runs south to north. So you could think of produce moving from South Australia to Alice, for example, and then the rail line picking up live cattle, taking it to Darwin and exporting it to Asia. A lot of that rolling stock heads back to Adelaide, underused or even empty. And that's our opportunity. That's our opportunity. The freight costs from Adelaide are comparable to Darwin and more frequent. And we believe, based on extensive third-party sourcing now, that if we take material south, we can ultimately arrive at much lower freight costs. Now, the NT government will have to make peace with that, but as you can see, we've got competitive tension emerging all over Tivan, which is exactly where we want to be. Speewah, Sandover, NT WA, maybe NT South Australia. We're working on royalties for these projects as well, which is a very important negotiation effectively between Tivan and WA government, NT government, and so on and so forth. It helps tremendously to have these two irons in the fire, even if Speewah is obviously much more advanced in terms of project development. But with Sandover, I would say that we're hugely committed. I think over the next couple of months, particularly when the drill cores start coming out of the ground, there'll be some more news here as well, exciting news, I think, over the next couple of months, so look out for that. But I think this will start to take real shape in the consciousness of investors and at some point the valuation of the company. Again, we own 100% of this project by design, and we're looking to retain that ownership as much as we can into next year and beyond. So a really, really tremendous opportunity for Tivan here. Turiscai is the third leg of the stool at the moment. This was Project X. I announced this, that we we're going to do Project X, I think, at the AGM, or it was called Project X thereafter. I can't quite remember the sequence now. But I'd been working with Timor's government previously in my career. I could see an opportunity to get up there and potentially be awarded some really prospective tenements. It was a 3-month process for Tivan to be granted these direct awards and to have the pick of the bunch. And that was driven by our geologists' assessment of historical reports. Timor is truly greenfield. It's never been drilled as such. And we are on track into next year for that to happen. For those that are following our ASX announcements closely, it's been pretty breathtaking. I mean, certainly for us to head into Turiscai. We knew about one of these prospects that we've now taken photographs of, and thanks to ASX for letting us share some of those visuals. But yeah, here we are, 2 expeditions in with 5 different copper outcrops, rock samples on the way to labs in Brisbane, which is great. It's a tremendous credit to our, I think, local team. We took a chance hiring locally from the start. It was there's some risk involved in taking steps like that in a country that is at this stage of development so early on. But we found the right people with the right experience. They've done a tremendous job. They're proud of working for Tivan. They're so proud of being Timorese as well. So it's the start of a really beautiful friendship, I hope. It's a country that I care about. I've said that many times before, and I hope that we have this opportunity next year to work from these incredibly exciting early stage visualizations to the identification of a viable economic resource. The thing I've mentioned about Timor before is that, like, the blue sky is so blue, it's so big, it's so unbounded. We went up there thinking that there might be an opportunity to find a porphyry or a large-scale volcanogenic massive sulfide based on basically our read-through of reports that were written in 1937. But that was our working thesis. And what we've found so far in terms of the quality of these locations and some of the mineralogy as well is only firming the conviction that the team has in their thesis. And really the next step will be the rock samples coming back with assays, because then we'll be able to see some of the constituent aspects of it, and that will probably give us a lot more insight into what we're looking for and where we're looking for it. The strategy, though, is systematic. We're not just trying to find like one location, take a risk with millions of dollars and stick a hole in the ground. That doesn't work commercially. It doesn't work from a site safety point of view as well, nor would it be consistent with the community social license that we're building up. Tivan's very well known in Dili already. So we don't want to be hasty on this. We want to be scientific, and that's what we're doing. You could think of us working up an incline as well. Timor's quite steep from the ocean on the south up to the ridges. And so what we're really doing is taking samples, water, soil, rock chips, from the south to the north up an incline, and we're trying to figure out where the geochemical anomalies stop. As you're going up the hill, if they stop at a certain point, that's really going to be your go zone in terms of where the deposit might be, because the water is pushing down these same anomalies. So we're trying to identify that point up the ridge and up the mountain where the indications stop. Now, it's not a perfect science. There's river systems all through here. The terrain is tough. It's rugged. It is also going to be a really significant undertaking if we choose to drill here next year. And so we are in some discussions with JV partners. We've had our door knocked in, frankly, on this. But again, the strategy is, let's try to retain 100% ownership. If we're strong enough, let's keep improving our knowledge base. Let's keep bedding down with community, with the government, so that if and when we're able to drill and we find something of significance, that we're able to progress with as much ownership as possible. It's a very exciting strategy, I think, for people, but I think there also has to be awareness of the execution risk involved. There is another company up there trying to drill at the moment, and put it this way, we would not have done it like that, and we will not do it like that. Tivan will be very focused on high quality execution, managing expectations throughout, whether it be with government or community, and we need to keep our people safe. This is not like Australia. The terrain is not just rugged in terms of being mountainous. It is susceptible to flash floods. There's all sorts of different animals up there that can bite you or kill you. And we cannot trivialize the risks of going into a foreign country such as this that's never been drilled before without a really robust safety regime, including emergency exits and so on and so forth. So part of the challenge into next year is to ensure that we have the appropriate capabilities to drill. And we will, but we'll be taking our time in building them across the end of the year and into Q1 as the monsoon's there. The near-term strategy is to gather as much information, geochemical information as we can to localize the search for what we believe is there. And that itself is very exciting. So that's the real quick project updates. I am burning through time here. Let me quickly move on to a couple of corporate matters. Our partners slide, obviously, for those that knew TNG or invested or have been invested here for a decade, this site sort of speaks for itself in terms of all change, and just look at the quality of the partners that our company now has. It's incredible. And yeah, a great achievement. In terms of one corporate matter, and I'm getting ahead of a whole bunch of Q&A questions here, so let me quickly work through this panel. We have received many questions, particularly over the last couple of months. It's an ongoing thematic in terms of share price, overhang of selling of Tivan stock, the various transition points the company made to get to this point. There still does seem to be some confusion amongst retail shareholders about what they just lived through in terms of the 249 campaign, the switch to Speewah, how that was funded, the pathway ahead. So it's it can be a bit frustrating for me at times having to go back through all of these things, but particularly as there are new shareholders at Tivan, let me just provide the basics and the lived experience. Right at the start of the transition from TNG to Tivan, we needed to acquire a different resource. It was imperative. There was no pathway forward with Mount Peak. The capex on that project was grossly understated by previous management. The NPV on that project was grossly overstated by previous management. The NPV on Mount Peak was firmly negative. There was no way that that project could have ever got built, in my view. So we went off on an acquisition spree. We were able to secure Speewah. We did that with cash that we did not have at the time and shares. And that meant I took the company into debt. And that is in the column Speewah acquisition balance, $10 million of debt at the start of Tivan. Then, in about a year later, when we switched from vanadium as the focus to fluorite, we entered into a convertible bond. That was necessary at the time. The company was under enormous pressure. Shareholders will probably remember the company was suspended on the ASX for 10 days or so. In both those moments, there was an opportunity for me to do something radical, which was to issue large amounts of TNG or Tivan shares at extremely low share price, recapitalizing the company that way through and diluting existing shareholders to the point which perhaps they should have been, given that the company was grossly overvalued when I took it over. So here I'm talking about doing large-scale share issuance at 1 cent or 2 cents or 3 cents. And in both those instances, that being the turn from TNG to Tivan, and in Q1, when we're moving from vanadium to fluorite, there was an opportunity to do a very, very significant discounted cap raise at that time. I said no, because I wanted existing shareholders of TNG to have the opportunity to join the journey that we're now on with their shareholdings largely intact and having avoided large-scale dilution. That meant it was a much harder journey for me, by the way, but we're here now and we've successfully done that through aggressive use of debt. Now, debt is hard. When you are a small company with no narrative at the start and you have no revenue for a couple of years ahead, it's incredibly difficult to carry debt. And this table shows the journey back. We were able to clear the acquisition balance through regular, small, but very disciplined cap raises, switching debt into equity. And we were able to retire the convertible note well ahead of schedule. Now, on the overhang question, the convertible note, and I said this at the time, was going to always result in the convert sponsor having a significant amount of shares and ultimately looking to liquidate those shares on market. That's the nature of these converts. We were trolled aggressively at the time. I can recall still people crying out that this was a doom loop and various other things. Well, they didn't appreciate that I did actually know exactly what I was doing and how I was going to manage it at the time, and that I've got previous experience managing these sorts of complex financial instruments. My job from that point onwards, having avoided large-scale dilution, was to create sufficient market liquidity to enable the convert sponsor to exit and also execute block trades along the way to expedite that process. And obviously to use those funds to bridge to Japan, which is what we successfully did. Long story short, the company over that challenging year was able to achieve all of those things. We induced a large amount of secondary market liquidity. The convert sponsor did ultimately sell a lot of shares. It did create an overhang, but we survived, and we also avoided hundreds of millions of additional shares being issued, and we avoided the situation that long-standing TNG shareholders perhaps should have faced, which is being wiped out in terms of their effective ownership of the company. So we chose a hard but honourable and very principled path. We have delivered in spades. I am pleased to say that the convert sponsor has now exited. I've got many questions about this, so I will tell you. They sold around 75 million shares on market on a VWAP over the past 14 months, and they are done. That was the final block trade last week that I orchestrated. So for those, I know this will ignite different conspiracy theories online. Please understand that the counterfactual was massive Tivan issuance at probably 2 to 3 cents in the first quarter of next year. Instead, we levered the company up and then delivered, and that is the best case outcome for shareholders. And for those that think there's a valuation gap, you now have your opportunity, and everyone is whole. So that was the journey. It's been brilliantly executed, in my view, and all of our shareholders, I think, can look forward to the months, quarters, and years ahead as a consequence of this radical transformation of a failing company into an emerging powerhouse. AGM, 20th of November. Look forward to it. It's going to be Melbourne. We rotated back to Melbourne after some indecision. I would say this was not driven by people saying we shouldn't do an AGM in Alice Springs. We will do an AGM in Alice Springs one day. I'm determined to do that. It's more that we have this center of gravity in Melbourne. I was in Melbourne yesterday, and I can share as well that the unnamed Australian family office investor that we're working with on the matching project equity capital is based in Melbourne. And so all roads lead to Melbourne for the AGM. It also gives us that great venue for those that came last year. It was a great event. We want to put on another great event. I think there'll be even more people this year, and it just takes the sting out of organising a new venue for us, and we obviously want to stay focused on delivering for the company. So Thursday, 20 November, please circle, please come. We'll put on a great show. The company will be absolutely flying by then. We're flying already, but I think give us 3-4 months and you'll see a lot more. So please come along. That's it. Okay, let me double check on the clock. 15 minutes. 15 minutes for this number of questions will be practically impossible, but I will try to keep it focused. AMA, in my view, is a very important part of accountability and corporate governance. We've produced this list of questions from our inbox, corporate inbox, a number of people wrote, and Hotcopper, and we've tried to organize them, but basically everything's here, even questions which are sometimes somewhat hostile in terms of the phrasing, but here to answer. And part of doing these sessions every 3 months is to facilitate exactly this. So I'll be brief, and if I've already addressed stuff in the comments so far, I will be extremely brief just to try to keep the flow going. But let me pull through as much as I can in the available time. So in terms of Speewah Fluorite, first of all, grouping these questions, dual program has been an enormous undertaking, and we are on track to expand the resource. That's part of the infill and resource extension drilling. That improves the quality of the resource. And of course, we're getting to know it much better as well. Through all this data, it will improve the mining plan. Ultimately, you're trying not to mine stuff which isn't mineralized. So the more intimately you know through all this drilling, the resource, the better. the prognosis for the project as we move into construction and then delivery. This is not a hypothetical exercise for some people, I guess, even for the shareholders that have been around for a long time. They haven't actually seen a project get built. This is what it looks like. This is real. This is not hypothetical for us. So there's an enormous amount of work going on. Shout out to everyone in the field. I know they're working really, really long hours. There's tremendous attention to detail. Even though we have a much bigger team, I'd say it's fair to say we're understaffed for what we're undertaking out on country, but it's very important work and very much on track. In terms of some of the questions around project definition, Cal, Royal, please refer to the PFS. We won't be making any other public statements. These questions have been answered in the PFS. It's all there. You can see cost support, $23 a tonne. In terms of trucks, it's around 10 a day. And there are other aspects of the PFS, which on a good read through, you'll learn more about the project. Next big update will be feasibility study. In terms of hydro, no, we're not considering it at this stage. Obviously, we've got so much work and it's out there somewhere, but the focus is on obviously getting to revenue and working through what are still complex permission processes. Lumbering hydro on top of that would be too much for us right now. And so whilst there are still discussions going on around different stakeholders, it's fair to say that everyone that's involved in the project, all of the stakeholders, are very focused on the path of least resistance, and that's not hydro right now. In terms of power lines, there is no power line to Speewah, so just another clarification, if you will. In the PFS, you'll see that we're talking about gas and solar, effectively a local grid. So there would be a power line from the solar plant at Speewah to site, but that's a kilometre. So we're not building a power line from the Great Northern Highway into Speewah at this stage. And so that's just really a clarification. In terms of ILUA agreements, again, as I mentioned on the way through, we have targets for ILUA for the access road. That's with Jurgen Tam. And then we have another target for Nanjua, which is the TO group that's been formed over the past year to represent traditional owners of the Speewah Valley. Now, we've been intimately involved in these processes. We did actually update our Indigenous Engagement Register recently as part of our work with NAIF. Logged 85 different meetings over the past 2.5 years with TO groups or on TO matters in the region. I've done most of those myself. That is, I'd say, unprecedented. So we've been really localized. We've been really focused on these topics. It's a core part of Tivan's mission, of course. I also want to emphasize that we have formal agreements in place. So that the last part of that question, I think, is slightly unfair in terms of how it's been phrased. Again, if you look through all of Tivan's ASX announcements, you'll see this progression moving from heritage protection agreements into resource protocol agreements. It's the resource protocol agreements that give you a pathway to ILUA, right down to sequenced meeting dates, finalisation schedules, and so on and so forth. So they are very complex processes, but we're very well advanced. I'm fully committed to this domain, both at Speewah and at Sandover. We're working on the same principles I've been articulating from the start, which is about genuine inclusion and participation and durable alignment. I would not say that it's not without its challenges, of course, particularly in the Kimberley, I would say. The Kimberley is different than the Pilbara. Central Australia is different again, but we're very focused on delivering for all stakeholders in the region, and we're on track. In terms of WA government, Carl, that's a really good question, because that is in the PFS as an item where we signal to shareholders that we would be looking for formal contribution from WA government to help pay for the access road. The access road's almost a separate project. One of our big achievements through the first half of this year was to realign the access road to a simpler route, a shorter route, and very importantly, away from what's known as Liama Gorge, which is a culturally sensitive area. So it shows the level of cooperation and engagement with the traditional owners that we were able to organise that so early and to work through all the complex processes with tenements and cultural heritage agreements. And so with that realignment done, we've rejuvenated our early discussions with the WA government. But fair to say there's a sequence here. The first thing that we really want to achieve with the WA government is to agree the royalty rate for fluorite. So this is not defined because no one's ever built a fluorite project in Australia. We can't go to Queensland and New South Wales and look at the royalty framework there and come over here. Now, we said in the PFS 2.5%, and that's the nature of our proposal to WA government, and we've emphasised various aspects of fluorite processing and mining, which in our view strongly support the application of that low tier of royalties, specifically the fact that we're targeting a 97% product that completely differentiates us from many other forms of critical minerals. On top of that, there are obvious challenges with doing something new in Australia. Plus, we have great complexity in aspects of the final product specs being achieved. Then on top of that, we're having this incredibly positive footprint up in a remote region, and we are working to create these durable benefits for the state. So the first course of business, Cal, is to do a deal with the WA government at 2.5% rather than 5%. So let's work that through, and then we'll jump back into the access road negotiations ahead of the May budget with WA government next year. But open dialogue back in Perth, done so many meetings with WA government on these subjects. It's with the most senior ministers, Minister of Mines, the Treasurer, and I can share as well, WA government was a great supporter of ours late last year in taking meetings with both Sumitomo Corporation and JOGMEC as well. So I'm very grateful for their support, open dialogue with a sequence ahead. In terms of cost of debt, premature to discuss that. NAIF has a mandate to do concessionary lending. Concessionary lending can take shape in different ways and forms. It can be a lower interest rate, it can be a longer term, it can have more generous collateral clauses, for example. It is the nature of NAIF to be able to provide that. It's part of their mandate. So, but premature to work through that. The next step is for us to make a formal investment proposal. And I think as well, if I can say, we're really pleased that both EFA and NAIF came in. It shows the level of significance, I think, of what we're achieving, that both lenders wanted to be involved. Again, only a couple of companies around Australia with that distinction, very few this early. I think Alpha HPA maybe in Gladstone, but it's a very different project, much more advanced, of course, has both EFA and NAIF. NAIF as well, I think, has been quite, they're even more disciplined than perhaps what they were, if I can phrase it that way. Last couple of years, you can see how few projects are in their due diligence pipeline, and they're very focused on achieving their mission and their mandate. And I think our project and our company falls really squarely within all aspects of their mandate. In terms of Pro Punter's question, the involvement of the different finances Pro doesn't actually affect NPV and IRR. What it means is that we can achieve those things. So again, there's sometimes debate online about NPV and so on and so forth. I won't open up that can of worms tonight. But we've produced, I think, a very strong PFS, very robust set of assumptions, and they're very transparent. Like what we've assumed is all spelt out. People can agree, they can disagree. But again, Sumitomo's come in and now JOGMEC's come in based upon the strength of our PFS. The difference is that most companies are out there with their NPVs and they can't raise the money. They can't. And that tells you that no one believes their numbers, or that they're in a critical mineral, for example, that doesn't have a pathway to market at this stage. The fact that we're pulling in these prestigious partners so early is a validation of what we've said. And it's the next phase is to mature the costs, explore ore sorting, for example, extend the resource, which we're looking to do, and start cracking on at Sandover. Because don't forget, with Sandover, we're going to have drill cores, and then we're going to have a scoping study, we're going to have PFS, and we're going to be able to start putting numbers on Sandover as early as Q1 next year. So this is all ahead. But the actual announcements we've made don't change NPV and IRR. In terms of the timeline, Norm, Yeah, we are expecting, and we said in the announcement for the Australian investor to move into like a binding phase on that term sheet and to be publicly revealed into the AGM. So November's the target. Switching quickly to Sandover Fluorite, still on the Q&A. Current thinking on the comparative scale, I mean, we're into speculation here, but we have the historic drilling at Sandover Fluorite, so we have a sense of what's in the ground. We're able to mark out the vein systems at Sandover. Perhaps the biggest unknown at Sandover is what's known as stockwork. So we can see these veins, they're visible, they're extensive. 7 kilometers is a long, long way. Think of that. Vast. What we don't know is there stockwork, like veins that run off these veins. We don't know the depth either. So we've got a working assumption, but it will be this drill program in October, November, where our knowledge will shift as a step change. To give you a sense, we've had approved around 8,000 meters of drilling at Sandover, and we think we can get that done in October, November. Again, a shout out to our geo team. Just think of the muscle that's been required this year to do two potentially huge drilling programs in 2 different remote locations. But the boys are up for it. They're all fired up to come south from Speewah to Sandover. It will depend on when we roll off Speewah, but I think there's this progression where a couple of guys can come off early as we start to wind down, and then the whole team rolls out there and wraps up before it gets too hot. And so 8,000 meters will give us a big, big lift in terms of our knowledge base. And addressing these next questions, it will give us enough material to test DSO. So again, this idea of mass balance and how much material, representative material, we need to be able to feed through test work. That's what we're missing at Sandover. Whilst it was drilled and we have data, we do not have core. And so this is what we're aiming to get. Then we run it through different forms of test work. We'll be able to ascertain the viability of DSO, we think, by Q1. Now, again, the aim here is to start with a much higher grade in the ground. We know that. Like whether it's 40, 50, 60 different parts, it's extraordinarily high. Can we use DSO? Again, this is ore sorting to get to 80 being met spar. If we can, then we have a fast track. If we can, but we do not know, and I don't want to cause undue speculation or raise undue hopes at this point. But I would say that we're going to be in a position by Q1 to make that probably public, but also to ascertain internally what it means for the project development pathway. This is why the MOU with Sumitomo was framed consciously around met spar and acid grade. There'll be a fork in the road. I think it's Q1. Based upon the drilling results, and then we'll know. This goes to Baraka's question about, is it then possible on the upside surprise that Sandover could actually be first to revenue? It might be possible, it might be, and we're not sure, but isn't it a great problem to have? It's sort of like, I was watching the Formula One on the weekend with Oscar doing his thing through Eau Rouge and overtaking Lando, and Lando goes up this curve and Oscar's in the slipstream, and then he pulls out and he accelerates past. It's sort of like that, perhaps, where you've got Sandover with all of these lessons that we're learning in the hardest way, in some ways, at Speewah, and we've got this knowledge base. And in a sense, Sandover is in the slipstream with Speewah, but we don't know if it will be able to pull out and overtake, and we have to wait and see. I would only say that if there is this fast track to Sandover, it will involve all of the same project partners and financing partners that we've already announced. This is a partnership that we want to, to consolidate and to ultimately evolve even beyond fluorite and to different critical minerals in terms of our Northern Australian footprint and potentially Timor. And so everything that we're learning at Sandover is going directly to Sumitomo, and we'll be making decisions together. The Australian Family Office investor as well. It's very important that you respect all parties in this knowledge curve, and that's the nature of what we're doing. So Baraka, I'm not sure, but you know me, and if there's an opportunity to get to cash flow early, it'll be hard to hold me back. So let's wait and see. Let's wait and see. Sandover AI. Now, this is a very good question, and then I'll try to pull things together in the last couple of minutes. We had our probably only real substantive disappointment in May, where the lead silver drilling with Earth AI disappointed. You know, it certainly disappointed us in terms of what we're expecting off the surface. It did not, let me say, shake our conviction in Earth AI as a partner. They've had other situations, I think particularly at Fontenoy in New South Wales, where some of the early results missed, and now they're onto what seems to be a PGE deposit, for example. And so what we're doing here is we're effectively restructuring the relationship with Earth AI. It'll take us a couple more weeks, I think, and it's principally because I've just been so busy on other higher priority items. But I expect us to stay engaged, both at Sandover AI and with Earth AI. And even independently of that, I've had a chat to Norm, shout out to Norm, about his pimple. This is a bit of an inside joke for people on hot copper. So I know exactly where that is now, and Tivan will drill that at some point just to test. So we haven't, we're going through, as I said at the time, off the disappointment, a review process. It's taken a bit longer just because I've been so focused on other things, but I'd say give it a month and we'll come out with a restructured pathway. And I hope and expect that will still involve Earth AI. It would be premature, I think, to conclude from a couple of drill holes that even aileron is done. It might not be. So let's wait and see, and let's follow the science, and let's work with our trusted partners. At Turiscai, the 5 samples, I think we had indications from Timor's government on one of them, and that gave us a bit of conviction that we wanted to get up there, of course, but it was really the historical reports and our independent analysis that led us to Turiscai over other jurisdictions or other tenement offerings. And so we've been surprised. We weren't expecting with this level of recurrence to be able to walk some of the river systems and with regularity find the quality of outcrops and veining systems and so forth that we have. And I think there'll be more. That's my understanding. And so, yeah, really exciting because it's just true greenfield and we don't know what we're going to walk into next. But I would again emphasize how much work's involved. This is really labor intensive work. And then you've got this work stream, which is now bedded down where we're having to export different samples to Brisbane. It takes some time to get that established. It is now established and we should get a pretty steady stream of results back from September, and we'll make decisions accordingly, on our own timeframes. But just again, emphasizing that it's been a really tremendous, I think, strategy to come up with. It's been executed really well. To Brendan, no relation question, the cost of acquiring Timor tenements, it was zero. Yeah, we paid nothing. So it's obviously now commitment on ours to follow through in terms of the work that we're doing, but the overall risk reward here has been exceptional so far. And so let's continue that journey. On vanadium, as I mentioned at the top of the call, not our focus at the moment, ongoing challenges. There are discussions infrequently, but they are still real with some parts of Japan, I would say. But again, the focus has to be, let's get to revenue. Let's make sure we deliver on Speewah Fluorite. That's the focus of the company. We have to turn Tivan from being, what we are at the moment into project delivery company. It's a step change, not just because you get to revenue, but all the credibility that you earn by delivering something. And so if we achieve that, I think the conversations with Speewah Vanadium will become more real. All of the nature of the JV negotiations, all the deal structuring was designed in a way to preserve the value of the Speewah Vanadium for Tivan as an option. A lot of the deep complexity that I'm working through with traditional owner negotiations also involve these two things. And so we're keeping the blue sky alive on vanadium. We're not spending money on it at the moment, and that's right, because as I've said publicly a few times, my general view is that the lack of a mature offtake market is debilitating for that sector. Even if other vanadium, companies don't want to say that, that is the truth. And that's why the pivot from vanadium to fluorite was so fundamentally important for Tivan. And obviously you can see the difference. In terms of the corporate questions, and then I'll wrap up. The KRR is a great relationship. It was a friendly acquisition coming off a very hostile situation through the 249, and it's remained so. There was speculation back in March, I think it was, when we were going through the escrow period of KRR. There was this moment online where shareholders were saying KRR is going to dump shares. It didn't happen. And it gets a little bit irresponsible sometimes, some of these comments. Everything that we've done from the deal onwards has been with respect and alignment with KRR. And so there's no active discussions as such, and I'm confident in terms of the alignment going forward. That might not always be the case, but it's not specific to KRR that there are broader discussions happening around the company. To close out with these last questions about institutional engagement, other forms of capital raising. Part of my job, of course, is to continue to promote Tivan's achievements and to build a back book, as it were, of institutional demand for the stock, and then at different moments in time to take advantage of that. And of course, you want as much as possible to be in a situation where if you're either coming to market for placements or if you have overhang, such as we did with the convert seller, where you can you're able to execute block trades or encourage block trades to happen. And I've already done that. And so maybe other instances ahead, but nothing specific to KRR. In terms of the broker question, yeah, there's already a broker involved. There may be others. It's not been a huge focus of mine. I think where it will become more relevant is when we get a second sort of valuation on Sandover. And it's not to say that they're not important. It's just that I feel sometimes, people think that these are magic bullets. They're not. And they can be written by AI now in 5 minutes. So, I think that broker reports are much less important than deep connectivity across investors right up and down the spectrum. And obviously, I've devoted a lot of my time to building those relationships. And the best evidence of that is the quality of the placement rounds that we've done. You can look through, I think, 7 or 8 placements or different forms of capital raisings now at Tivan over the past 2 years, average out the discounts to market. There's no other stock in the sector that's done it our way as consistently and bringing in new investors. And I can say that the interest is maturing. Like I was in Melbourne with super funds this week. There's absolute interest. So Jennifer Hewitt's article, page 2 on the Fin Review, definitely got a lot of people's attention. They're sort of breathtaking by how fast we've moved and the quality of the names involved. They get to play catch up now, which is all well and good. And we need to stay focused as a company on achieving what we've been achieving so far, guided by our values and principles, of course, but really, really focused on execution. So that's it. A bit over an hour. Apologies for that. Hopefully, for those that were new, it's a tour de force. For those that have been focused on every up and down for the past couple of months, I'm sure there's quite a lot of new information tonight. Hope you enjoy it. And for all, please feel free to share these sessions. We obviously want more visibility. We want the word of mouth to continue to spread, that we are building something, really, really different. I think we have this scenario now where with our pathway at Speewah, an emerging pathway at Sandover, and these incredibly prestigious project partners, we have this opportunity to get to free cash flow and to profits, and profits without tax, because the company is sitting on its incredible tax losses from previous management. So as I've said before, everything changes at that point. You're no longer on the placement circuit. you've got profits to reinvest in projects that we're already working on, and you can really start to evolve not just the strategy, but the reach and ultimately the profitability of the company. We have to stick to our comparative advantages. We've been shown various other deals this year. We've said no to a lot of things, so we have to retain that discipline, because everything that we're working on should translate to profits, revenue in that 2027, 28, 29, 30 period. If we crack that, and I think we will, I really do believe that, the company will be completely re-rated, and it should be en route to that point. But you are the master of your own destiny once you have a project that's profitable, and that is the aim. So with that, I'll wrap up. 2-3 really frenetic months, tremendous amount of work at site, tremendous amount of work at the corporate level, and some really, really high profile achievements, which I'm proud of, very durable achievements. Let us now go back to work. And I would encourage everyone to, as I said, share the message, share the progress, but also come to Melbourne. I think it will be a big, big coming together of the Tivan community now on the East Coast and from further afield. 20th of November, Thursday, we will put on a show. So please continue to track our progress until then, and I hope to see you there. Thanks.